Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Ball Watching a little bit earlier than I think we all were expecting to be back. But Justin, it's warranted. We had an absolute news bomb drop now just 2 hours ago. So we're trying to be quick to the story here and get this to you all. We've already got the room just flowing with comments and people. So everyone, welcome to the stream. We are going to break down the breaking news. Justin, today, July 1st, St. Louis City SC announced the departure of the club's inaugural head coach, Bradley Carnell, and technical director John Hackworth will manage the team on an interim basis as City begins the search for a new head coach. We'll get to knee-jerk, Justin. We'll get to our structure here. But what do you think about some of the comments from Lutz and co after?
And actually, first, Jake, I'm going to start with our fans, people that DM'd us. I think a lot of people are surprised by this, and I guess I get that sentiment. And I think we're really going to break it down here with why we think this happened, and we're going to back it with stats. I think you're going to hear a lot of podcasts and what people's thoughts are. In my opinion, everybody's going to have their thoughts. I think it's fair for us to bring the facts, talk about why we think this occurred, and then let people kind of form their own opinion. We definitely have our own opinions. We'll talk about that here, but I mean, the initial thoughts from the club themselves. Lutz said in the release, he said, given Bradley's many contributions to the club, this was not an easy decision. Unfortunately, based on our year 2 results to date, we believe a coaching change is best in the interest of the club as we look to regroup and look to improve our performance and our results going forward. And then that was also even kind of echoed by the president and GM, Diego Gigliani. He said, on behalf of everyone from City SC, we'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to Bradley for his time at the club. He was an integral part with the club's success during the historic first campaign. Bradley, Claudia, and their family embrace St. Louis, and we wish them nothing but the best moving forward. And I think that's the correct way to put it. And I have a feeling they're going to dive into it a little bit more. I mean, this is a business, but I'm going to go ahead and say this guy's family to these guys. They're going to come out with those first initial topics, and I don't think they're really going to trash Carnell. Everybody knows where we're at in the season right now. They do have a 1 p.m. press release on the City app, so you guys can catch that just after we get off here today, too.
Yep. I love that you laid in the comments there, Justin. And I want to set the foundation with one thing to start before we get into our knee-jerk reactions, positive, negative, what have you. This is a human being, and anyone losing their job is awful. You know, it's a really tough circumstance regardless of what industry or area you work in. So for anyone doing the victory laps or dancing about this, think about that side as well. We talk about, how much Leuven went through with some of the adversity and his wife's, awful diagnosis with cancer and giving him space. Like, I want to take the same approach here. Like, I'm not, even if you're from a sporting perspective happy about it, that's fine. But remember that this is a human. He's, now got to think about his family and what's next for them. And they're put into a little bit of instability. So I do want to reiterate that I definitely feel for him in this moment. I'm sure it's very, very tough.
And this is one of those things, Jake, we talk about it, that it's a business, but it's not like Carnell was just like, I'm just going to go out there and try to lose these games. This guy was trying his best. This is a difficult situation the team's in with injuries. And some of the guys that we've loaned out and are now sold and looking to sell, and all the locker room issues that we've had as well. So this has not been an easy season, but I do agree with the club. I think this is a time period where we do have to kind of make a decision. This is where no one wants to be, including Carnell himself. And I think it's got to take some rash decisions to try to pull us out of this.
So, Justin, with that said, obviously the press release, we're going to learn more, but we are time of recording an hour before that. So we're doing the pre-press release with Ball Watching here. So once again, welcome to everyone joining. We're getting pings from everyone right now asking for the takes. So we're trying to just bring it right here. So apologies to hear the pinging in the background. But Justin, you've kind of gotten maybe a little bit into yours. But before we talk the facts, back it up with some context, some actual, real things, I do want to give us a chance here to share our at least initial knee-jerk reactions. Do you want to start, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I can give it a start. I think initially, I'm not surprised. I think we've seen a lot of different podcasting groups, all the Mecca Banter guys, a couple of people on Twitter. Oh, I think the Mecca guys already put an episode out like a month ago, like Carnell in or out, and they kind of did a discussion there. So shout out to them, because I originally, when I'm looking back on it, and you're looking at the timing, like the season that we had last year, and I won't get into the facts of it. The thing that I am not surprised by is the pregame and in-game tactics by Carnell. I'd say more specifically the in-game tactics and the timing of subs and how we manage games. that's been a frustrating point for me, not even this season, but last season. I think last season we were able to pull these games together as a group and we're able to get points out of where some places where we shouldn't have. But this season, his tactics almost threw us in a harder position to come out of those. And so, from my opinion and where we sit in the season tickets and like watching the game management, it's frustrating to me of when people come on or when they don't come on. So, in my opinion, I'm not overly surprised, especially in the timing of the year. You and I talked about it on the preview. If we lose versus San Jose at home, I'm going to write this season off and we're not making the playoffs. We will still be here and we'll be covering the team, but we'll talk about the numbers and everything. If we lose versus the worst team in MLS at home, it was going to be done. And I think we're digging too deep of a hole too late in the season. So I think this is the time period to figure it out. What are your thoughts?
So let me summarize yours. So yours is not shocked and it's justified, right?
Correct.
Okay. See, I'm going to go totally opposite you. And I don't think you're going to be surprised at that. But I found this shocking because we've talked about this a little bit on the show already. And for me, thinking, and I'm framing my view as both personal and what I would expect the club to do. To me, St. Louis City SC is not a club that makes these types of, I'm going to call it rash decision, and I'll back that up soon here, but it doesn't feel like us to do things like this. This feels like an LAFC, an LA Galaxy, a Miami type situation where things aren't going right and you have to hit the panic button and make a change at the coaching position. For a team like us that just performed like we did last year, reset all expectations for better or for worse, and for as bad as we've been, and we're going to get into a lot of the facts, so we'll promise we're going to layer those in here. This shocked me. This really shocked me. I thought at least, given the contract extension, he was going to get the rest of this season, especially looking at the reinforcements to say, can you turn it around with more quality in the team? Because that's one of the big knocks that people have, defending Carnell is, well, who have you given him, right? Like there's not any depth. There's not very big, quality additions that we've gotten since last season where we overperformed significantly. So I think it is really rash. I think we could be kicking ourselves for this. And I think Jeff Reuter on one of the writers for The Athletic just had a short tweet where he responded. He quote tweeted the St. Louis City SC announcement and said, insanely harsh and short-sighted. And I think that's a great summary, in my opinion. I don't think this is a long-term move. I think for some reason we're in this business right now where we're giving off the opinion that it's a results now type thing. And I don't agree with that. For me, I'm seeing a much longer term vision and future with this club. And this feels like a short term type approach to it. So again, I see the case, and we're going to cover the case from all different angles. But to me, I'm on the opposite. I think I was surprised. And I think this is a short sighted view and decision.
Just quickly on the one rebound, because I agree with you. I was like, all right, where the reinforcements are coming. We talk about Toyer, Hartzell, these guys, Toyer, and then they're going to be practicing with the team today. So the one thing I will say on that, Jake, is we have 5 games between now and then. And then technically when those guys get here, we only have 10 left. If we are not, and we'll talk about the math and the magic number and stuff later on, we don't have time to let Carnell figure out those 5 games and then give him another 3 or 4 with those when the Germans come over here. At that point, it's too late. So that's where I do think that they needed to shake things up. I do think we've had a couple people saying here, like, is it the locker room? Is it that? I'm not going to go ahead and say that it's all Carnell that would be breaking up this locker room. I think on a couple of these guys that are getting sold or loaned out, that's above Carnell's pay grade as well. And I will say, unfortunately, Jake, you'll see it in a lot of other sports too. Just because the team is losing, it's not the coach's fault all the time either. So I will say something's got to change. And usually that's what happens. What are you going to sell off like Klaus? Like, no, it's usually going to come from the guy. Someone's head's got to roll. And I think that's the part of the business that Carnell understands as well, has been a part of that with the New York Red Bulls. Hackworth is very well aware of it as well. Unfortunately, something needs to change to make the fan base kind of, all right, let's see if we can do this again. And he's the easiest out. You're not going to fire Lutz. You're not going to fire Diego. You're not going to fire Berkey or any of these guys. So like something's got to go, and he's the easiest one to call out. So unfortunately, I just think that something had to change, and it was him. I'm not blaming it completely on Carnell, but I do see some synergies as to why they chose that.
That's fair. And we'll get more into our reactions as we layer in, I think, the facts. And I think what's really important here is that you do consider all of the tangible, objective things that have come before this and that have led up to this moment that paint the fuller picture on this team. And so I think let's start here, Justin. Let's start at the beginning. We hired Carnell in January of 2022. He had a full year plus run in to his first inaugural season with the team in 2023. So during that time, you probably think about he's, installing the principles he wants to play with, working with Lutz a lot in those, development sessions around what they want City to be. He's working with City 2 as well on an assistant type basis with Hackworth. And overall, you look at his management so far, now obviously over, but 62 total games, went 22, 25, and 15 in the Open Cup, 1-1, Leagues Cup 0-2, playoffs 0-2, and then Champions Cup for CONCACAF 1-1. MLS regular season, very starkly different. 2023 versus 24. 2023, 17, 12-5 win-loss draw. 2024 so far, 3-10-7. So those are the numbers. When you put it kind of all together, I mean, he's kind of almost like breaking 500, right? Like overall, when you look at his record as an MLS coach for City, what do we say? 20, 22, and 12.
Sorry, I got distracted, Jake. Roman Berkey just got announced as an All-Star. So let's put a little positive spin into this. It's like 8 minutes ago. So there's a lot coming out today for the team. That's a lot of back and forth. So yes, I will say, and I know you covered all this. I mean, it's tough. And when you look at it, and you've already seen a couple people putting the comments in here as well. He literally finished second place in the Coaching of the Year voting. When you go look at it, Pat Noonan had a total of 45% of the vote. Carnell was second with 28% of it, in front of the Columbus Crew's coach with 12%. So that's where one of those things where people are like, how can you have this quick fall from grace? But Jake, and I think
hold on, I want to say one thing, Justin. One more thing. That record, just look at the record really quick. And I agree, the Coach of the Year voting, I mean, he won the media vote and then just lost the player in the club. But look at the record, 20, 22, and 12. Obviously as sports fans, you want to see that win number much higher. But if I would have told you that come this time in our second season, that's our record, would that have been a sense for issue for you, or urgency around a coaching change, or this isn't the right direction because we're heading? Because I look at that and I'm like, that looks par for the course for St. Louis City in their second year.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jay. If you told me before we started that in our second year we'd be almost 500, I would probably take that. However, we can't rely on the morals of us going and winning 17, 12, and 5 in the first season. We are crashing and burning with a 3-10-7 record currently right now. And more specifically, Jake, I think I have it further down here in the notes. What we have now won, 4 wins in our last 26 matches. One of them being Champions Cup. So if everybody's trying to do the math, that's where the fourth one comes from. We lost our last 4 games of the last season, and we've lost 20 this year already. So that is where I understand when you look at it, and you were to tell me before we started as a team that we would have basically 500 throughout season and a half, I'd be like, okay, we're doing solid. We may have made the playoffs last year. We're probably in a good spot this year if we didn't make it last year. No, we were at the top last year. We're almost at the bottom this year. And something has been absolutely falling apart in the meantime.
It's the Mr. Freeze roller coaster, man. I mean, we hit the peak and you've quickly backed it up right back down to earth. But just keeping on with the facts, Justin, he was signed to a contract extension as coach in the beginning of this year on January 31st. They didn't reveal at that point, at least not to my knowledge, the tenure at which they signed that contract extension. So you imagine they're buying him out when they're doing this. Or no, sorry, it was through 2025. So it was 2 years for the extension. So they did come with that. So you still have to pay him out, by the way. If people are just thinking you just fire him, you do pay him out. I'm sure it's not a big thing to deal with, but that is a little weird to me too. It's like, did we not have the, and again, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate and just thinking through both sides of this, but when you sign to them an extension, you show them a level of trust and reward them for their success in the past. And I think with that comes a little bit of armor for tough times like this. And I think what you're seeing here is that the tough times got too tough for Lutz, Diego, and co. And eventually they're looking, internally and saying, do we really have to stomach the rest of this season with what we're seeing from Carnell? Or is it better for us to look at greener pastures and see if there's another coach out there that could bring us more stability for the end of this season and prepare us for next season in a better way?
So my question to you, Jake, on that, when you're saying with the extension, you're giving him extension to reward him for what he did and looking forward. Now, how would you reprimand him for how poorly we had performed since that extension? I think that's a very similar, all right, you did really well. We're gonna give you a bonus essentially. But now when you're doing that poorly, you can't like just, oh, we're gonna take a year off your contract. You kind of just gotta cut it. So I think that's where it's tough for people. It's like, but it's a business. We talk about this. And right now, this team is not winning. It's affecting ticket sales, which is a business perspective as well. And that's where I think that something needs to happen. And unfortunately, he's probably first on the chopping block when you look at these things.
Yep. No, and again, I get there's a case on both sides. And I think that's all I'm wanting to say is I see both sides of this. I might feel towards one way, but there is legitimate logic to be seen on both sides of this stand. And, like you said, the urgency is there. 4 wins in the last 26 matches, including Champions Cup. And I think we'll get into some of the not as tangible, but there is evidence to cite some of these concerns. For me, the biggest thing being questionable man management skills, both on and off the field. We're already seeing one. I mean, I'm going to spoil my own party here. I mean, Santiago Beltran is already reporting that Sam's back in training all of a sudden for City, despite him not being there for the last couple days, weeks with ongoing transfer negotiations and such. Now, is that a direct correlation? Maybe not, but I like to read the tea leaves a little bit here, and I think to myself, off the field, I am not convinced of his ability to manage the players. He's definitely had some issues, both with how they develop as players, and two, I think on the personal side. And he's part of it. I know Lutz is part of it as well. I'm not just saying it's only Carnell, but the Sam thing I think is the biggest living reminder of that. I think how he handled Pedro and Dewar as well. I mean, Pedro, we signed him and then you never saw him basically. Like, what's going on? Is he not able to get the best out of some of these players? Is his development, is his approach too rigid and he's not able to flex and meet some of the adaptive sort of styles that these players bring? Like, I question some of that off the field stuff, but looking on the field for me, we talk about it, Justin, the subs, awful timing most of the time. And sometimes his hands are tied with our depth this season, but the man management on the field, adjusting tactics, we are a one trick pony at this point. We have one way to do things, and that's our way. And if it's not that way, we look lost. We have a mounting injury crisis. I'm not blaming that on him, but is he training a certain way? Does he like to do a certain thing on the training field that just runs these players ragged and opens us up to injuries on, off the field, but on the training field, and we don't get to see these players like Klaus, for example. There's been other instances as well.
Yeah, I would say, and I'm going to touch on it real quick because Tom Bogert did a quote tweet of Santiago's tweet, and he said, I heard a big part of Sam's future being unclear was the relationship that he had with Bradley Carnell. Not surprising he's back in training today with Carnell gone. Maybe he stays in St. Louis now. Still TBD, but definitely more of a possibility than before. Also, quickly on Pedro, Jake, his loan ended yesterday. So he is now going to be available as well. I could see that being something. We've talked about the left back has been a position that we've been kind of rotating. This would be an awesome opportunity for City to show, hey, go get some minutes on a different team and come back and show us what you can do. Because unfortunately, right now, Miggy's not getting minutes. So the loan aspect of how we're using this right now is not working for us. I would love to see if they're going to bring Pedro coming back as well. But just wanted to comment on both of those things because it is going to be interesting now. Like, are we going to see Sam? I don't think you're going to just shove him straight. I was going to say you're not going to shove him straight in the starting lineup, but without Klaus now, maybe he is going to be just a starter on Wednesday. That would be absolutely absurd. This is going to be a roller coaster of a week, and that's why I put that in here, Jake. I loved it. Duck said, didn't think I would hear a Six Flag reference on the pod. This is a roller coaster. I mean, everything. You bring them all in. Batman, Superman, the Boss, Screaming Eagle, Mr. Freeze. Throw them all into one. This is going to be a crazy week for City.
And there is so much division amongst the feelings here. But all I want to say is that a good amount of division is healthy as long as you can see where everyone's coming from on this. Like, we can do this podcast and coexist together without feeling the exact same way about it. But I think the point of our doing this is just to paint the whole picture that there is a lot, but also just to continue on the path. I think there's other stuff that's happening in and around the club that's not publicly available information. And I think there's this behind the scenes stuff that I can't put my finger on it, but something feels off in the dressing room. And you've talked about it before, Justin. Like, is there a vibe? Is there a culture sort of issue or cancer going around where we've got this weird mentality or warped mentality, or there's factions that are separate in the club? I'm like, that the head coach has got to have a grasp on that. And if you're caught having poor relations with a guy like Sam Adeniran, I know the guys like Sam Adeniran, at least that's what I've heard. Like, how does that reflect on his character if he can't relate to him enough or communicate in a healthy manner with him? So again, I think there's other cultural stuff going on here too that's not on the field or off the field. I guess that's technically off the field, but again, we're speculating a little bit there. Like we're getting away from the facts, but it looks like there's evidence of it.
No, I would say there's two of those things, Jake. One, and then people are going to say, why did we? It's mainly the same core group of guys. Why didn't we see this last year? You don't really have the arguments that you have when you're winning that much. Last season, the locker room is just all bumping music, dancing around, playing chess. Well, you probably got like Hebert in the corner doing like a Rubik's Cube, and the guys are laughing at him. Like the guys were just gelling all last season. It's when you start facing a season where you are 20 games in, you have 3 wins. That's when like some of the things that like, oh, that thing kind of annoyed me about this guy, and I'm going to bring it up now. And I think that's also where it came in a little bit with Sam. And then unfortunately now, talk about a vibes guy, AZ. AZ was a vibe guy in the locker room, and now he's out. Sam was also, I would say, we talked about it. Sam, AZ, and Watts are like this. They're literally 3 peas in a pod. I don't even know. Can you have 3 peas in a pod? Those guys made it work. But unfortunately now with AZ out, Sam looked like he was on his way out. I think that's breaking up a little bit of the locker room. Even if it's just those 3 guys that are being broken up, you could see that from other guys like, wow, my best friend could leave just as quickly as AZ just left from those guys. So, and like I said, though, that's not all. It's not Carnell pulling the strings like get AZ out of here. Like that is way up at the top. However, it is affecting the locker room down below.
No, I agree. I'm fully with that, and I think it's become more and more evident to me that there's some version of that going on right now because it's like even if it's not me that it's happening to, it's like when will it be me, or when will I deteriorate my relationship with the coach and he'll want to sell me? Because Aziel Jackson was the legitimate next coming last year, and now he's on a different team. In a matter of a couple months into the season for what I believe is probably going to look like a cut rate transfer eventually, but it's demoralizing a little bit. And I think I want to layer one more thing in here, Justin, a pro Carnell thing as well, because I didn't get to cover this in my kind of stance. But again, one of the reasons why I think this is harsh on Carnell is we've talked about a lot of the negatives, and I want to go back to a couple positives, and that is he currently still has the lowest payroll in the MLS, and you're firing a coach for not being last in the league on the lowest payroll, despite we had the 3rd lowest payroll last year and we overperformed significantly. So I'm not saying we should be last if we're spending the least, but you're kind of setting someone up to fail if you're going to hold them to this standard, given you're not paying anywhere near what some of these contenders are, despite expecting us to be contending for the playoffs, at least right now. I think that's a little bit of a double-edged sword, and I think it's a little bit inconsistent to have those expectations and to fire in a situation like this. The other thing I want to say is injuries, as much as I believe maybe his training tactics could be at fault, at least somewhat here, some of it also you just can't control. Like Celio snapping his leg on a play like that, having his breakout season, those types of things. I think the chips just kind of fell away this year, where they were falling for us last year. They fell away this year. And between that, and I think just this rigid approach he has to the game where it's just not malleable enough for today's age, I think that's just what they see on the writing on the wall. And Lutz and co are, you know what? Maybe this is the time to jump ship. And I don't think it's a concession of this season. I think it's more of a let's give Hackworth a go. We've got some reinforcements coming. We've got some light at the end of the tunnel here, and maybe want to head in a different direction, because with this, you'd expect our playing style to probably change as well, unless they want to keep hiring from the Red Bull side and that tactic and style of play. But you could see some serious changes to this team from a playing perspective as a result of this.
So I would also say from a locker room perspective, the one thing that Carnell would have control under is the starting 11. And the fact that we talked about it with Nate on the verdict so many times, and we've had a little bit more consistency this year, but the fact that we have not had a consistent starting 11, we haven't had a back-to-back starting 11 more than 3 times in a row in the past season and a half, that also affects the player's mindset in the locker room. And like you talked about it, like, is it me? Is it my guy next to me? That's not only are you going to be with the team, are you going to play, or are you going to make the starting 11, the team of the 18 on the match day? So I think that is one additional thing that maybe that's where they're seeing from above. Like, I mean, this specifically in this Vancouver game, he just threw it all out there. And I don't know, like, they're probably just like, dude, this is the last straw. What was that starting 11? So I think that's obviously jumping to some conclusions as well. But Jake, the one thing that I wanted to bring up that I didn't have enough time to do some research on in the last hour since we got this was I want to do some comparisons of what some other MLS firings that have happened recently and or how that has kind of come to be. And I know that you have a perfect example of this, but one thing that I want to mention real quick, Tom Bogert put out there are now 6 MLS jobs available right now, including ours. And we're talking about, like, obviously it's not just 11 dudes running out there. There's interim coaches, but Atlanta United, Nashville, FC Dallas, San Jose Earthquakes, and San Diego FC, who play next season. But including us, that is 6 teams that are without a coach right now, which is quite a bit for a league that only has 30 teams. That's 20% of your coaching staff or of your teams that just don't have a head coach. But you brought up a perfect example of how has this happened when you had such a great season before? How can you have such a quick fall from grace? Because Carnell literally signed the extension 5 months ago yesterday.
Yeah, when this happened, I tried to think of comparisons, and it's funny you mentioned a couple of the ones that just happened recently. We've played like a bunch of those teams too, and we're about to play San Jose, so we'll have 2 interim coaches facing off in this one, both coaching for their respective jobs potentially if they're going to be named full time. Hot take: I'm making a prediction right now. Hackworth has a decent turnaround with this team, and we install him as the manager. So I'm going to go ahead and say that right now, full-time manager. But the comp that I wanted to draw your all's attention to is for those that watch Premier League, this legitimately just happened. And it's not the exact same, but it's really close, like eerily close. So for all those that watch Premier League, or if you didn't, you probably heard about Leicester City and their magical run towards the Premier League title back in, I believe, 2016 it was. And they had hired Claudio Ranieri for that season. Now, Claudio Ranieri wasn't a nobody. He had coached in and around Europe, but they brought him in. Leicester City had minimal expectations. They had the worst odds to win the Premier League that year. And he comes in. They have an electrifying season. Jamie Vardy, Riyad Mahrez, like just the emergence of stars. And they put it all together and they win the Premier League title. Obviously, we didn't win the title last year. We lost in the first round of the playoffs. But we came in first in Western Conference, and that was far and away just no one would have expected that. Like, we were obviously, all the rankings were in the pre-season predictions were, bottom of the Western Conference. So then we win it. And we failed in the playoffs, but that was crazy. And we were, I think, at least overly, at least excited about what was to come, because that's a lot of points to accumulate over a short amount of time in your first season. So did Claudio, and he won the league. So even more impressive than Carnell and obviously Premier League. And the next season, they fired him in February for underperforming and not having good results. Leicester, I think, was doing well in the Champions League, but not enough in the Premier League, and they got rid of him. And obviously, they've now since moved down to the Championship. But that story of being able to treat those that have done you so well in a short amount of time and to turn away from them very quickly when things go sour, I think tells me a couple of things. Like, Leicester doesn't feel like to me a team that would do that, but they did it, and look where they are now. You'd wonder what would happen if they would have stuck with him. He's bounced around a lot since then, but the situation, I think, remains the same, that you see immediate and immense success followed by a tremendous sort of downfall, and the club decides to go a different direction ultimately, where I think for us, this is signifying more than just an unhappiness with the results to me. I think there is more of a potential ideological shift coming here, where we don't like necessarily where we're going, especially from a tactics perspective. I don't think this whole thing's going to switch around. We're not going to be a pressing team anymore, but this rigidity to it, I think, is what I'm seeing the writing on the wall for probably changing with this new coach coming in.
And so, yeah, I think our playing style, one, is going to change. I also think the vibes are going to change with these guys. We talked about it already when we were playing other teams earlier this season, like FC Dallas. We talked about their playing style, and originally you almost have to throw that out the window because, one, the playing style is going to change, and so are the mindsets of the guys and the players. I think the majority, I don't think there's a lot of guys in that locker room that were tied that closely to Carnell to where they're going to be extremely pissed this occurred. And I have met John Hackworth. This guy is an absolute awesome human being and a winner. If we talk about his background a little bit, Jake, he's the assistant coach for the first team right now, the technical director and the coaching director for City. He coached City 2 to the 2022 MLS Next Pro final as well. And before he came to us, he was already a winner as well. Head coach and sporting director of Louisville FC, who won the USL Championship title in his first year and went back-to-back finals in the next year as well. He also had 5 seasons with the Philadelphia Union, 3 years as an assist coach with them before becoming the head coach for them from 2012 to 2014. And I think one of my favorite stats that we covered, 2 years ago now, Jake, when we first put Hackworth on for City 2, He was the head coach of the U.S. U17 national team, leading them to the 2017 FIFA U17 World Cup in his 4th World Cup tournament with the team. You know who was on that team? Serginho Dest, Tim Weah, Josh Sargent, just to name a couple of those guys. This guy has been integrated in soccer for tens of years, and I'm excited to see what he can do for the first team.
I think I'd be a lot more upset today if we didn't have John Hackworth as an assistant coach and now coming on to be interim. Because a lot of people, interims, they vary from here. This is a guy that's interviewed for a lot of head coach jobs and has been etched into that position, at least in a couple of articles that I've read over the last 2 or 3 years where we've been worried about losing him. But I'm excited about this. There's 2 angles for me. One, the new coach bump. You got to just acknowledge it. It just happens. I feel like a lot of in soccer. I don't know. I can't speak for other sports, but the new coach bump is real. And what does that mean? This team finds a way to circle up and get together and you unite around this new coach, this new voice in the locker room. And there's usually an exuberance. There's an energy around the team that leads to better results, at least in the short term. So that happens. I can't have the numbers to correlate that right now. But on the other side, I think he's tremendously qualified. Like you just read out his resume, Justin. The only thing I want to say about Philadelphia time is he started in June of 2012 and steered them to the U.S. Open Cup semifinals, despite inheriting a team that was not faring too well that season. His first full season, he topped out at second in the East, but they did miss the playoffs by a couple of points that season. In his second full season, he had a rough go, kind of similar to this, with a 3, 6, and 7 start. And only 15 points, into June of that season, and he was relieved of duties by being replaced by Jim Curtin. So he's got experience. He's had success at the USL level, at the MLS level, at the US U17 men's national team level. There's a lot of good things to think about when you think about John Hackworth. He's done it with City 2. He took this team to the finals. By the way, City 2 wasn't being expected to do a lot of the things they did in that first season. And what he's able to do, I feel like John Hackworth, for as good a coach as we just talked about with his resume, he gets the best out of the teams that he coaches. And I think that's what we need right now. We're not going to be a showstopper. We're not going to go fly into the playoffs this season and probably shake up a ton of things. We could make the playoffs, though. I think our roster is going to get, bolstered with some new acquisitions here. I think Hackworth, from his experience, is a guy that's going to get the most out of players, or at least more than the staff think that Carnell is getting right now. So it's both a win now and a very safe option. I feel like he's a familiar face. Everyone knows him. I feel like everyone likes him from what we hear at the club. So I think it's a very easy transition for the club to go this route while they look for a new manager. I don't think they're going to rush this at all.
Absolutely not. And I will say, Jake, I'm going to bring it up right now, bringing us into the forward-looking for City right now. So as you can see for everybody watching visually, and I'll talk it out loud for everybody that is listening, top line, City right now, we are 12th in the conference, 26th in the Supporters Shield standing across the MLS with 19 points. Now, comparing that, this is the rest of our season. We have a total of 14 regular season games left. I don't even care about Leagues Cup. I do not even want to think about that right now. Let's talk about how we can possibly make the playoffs. So we have 14 games left. Typically, Jake and I have always said, and I'll come out with a magic number probably later this week, to make the playoffs, you need to be around 45 points. I think last year it was 44 and 45 points, depending on what conference you were in. So that would mean, as of right now, in our 14 games, we need 26 points out of our next 14 games. How can we get there? That would be 7 wins, 4 ties, and 3 losses. 7 times 3 is 21, plus 4 will give us the 25 points. 24 points, whatever. We're a point off on here on the math. However, this is how I think we get there, and this is all speculative, but we are playing San Jose, Kansas City, New England, San Jose again, and Kansas City again. When you're looking at these teams, their ranks right now, these are the bottom teams in the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, and very close to the bottom in the total MLS. Right now, that is 5 total games. And I would say, yes, 3 of those are away. But, I mean, 2 of them are away at San Jose and New England, 1 of them at Kansas City. That's a tough game. I'm going to go ahead and say we need to win all of those games against those teams. That would give us 5. Would it give us 5 wins? Yes. Then where else can we pull out a dub? Vancouver. We just saw the game right now. We're at Vancouver. If that game's at home, I think we can win it. That's another winnable game for us. And then lastly, towards the end of the season, our last home game versus Houston, that would give us our 7 wins and our 21 points. That would get us at 40 points right there. Then how can we get, let's call it 4 ties. We get 44 points, and I bet you we sneak into the wild card with the way the points are shaking out right now in the West. Where can we get these ties? I think we get a tie at Colorado, at Seattle, home versus Minnesota, and then back versus Minnesota again at Minnesota to end the season, close it out with a tie. And we would sneak into the playoffs with 44 points. Yes, I understand that is quite the turnaround for these fellas, but let's talk about the bump. Let's talk about that. We only have 5 games until we get the reinforcements coming in. Only 4 more games now until we have the reinforcements coming in with Toyhert, Martel, and Gerwood Reich. I do think that this team can get this dub versus San Jose on Wednesday. You're back home against Vancouver, a very winnable game. And if we can just get 2 away ties at Colorado and Seattle, we're very much on our way to make the playoffs. Yes, this is very optimistic. However, I just want to put a little bit of hopium into everybody's day with the amount of, I'd say, turmoil and everything that's going to be going on with City this week.
Got a question here, Justin, from Joe, and I love it because he said those teams have already marked winning those games against us. And by the way, that's exactly where I want them. And I agree. I'm sure they have. I mean, look at the dumpster fire that we've been. So I love that. We're back where we were to start last season. We are back at the bottom. We have bottomed out. I think at least we've bottomed out. And it's only up from here. Let those teams write us off. We'll walk into their house and absolutely F some S up. I mean, like, you're going in here with 0 expectations. I mean, we have kind of basically not disintegrated everything we did last year, but we're a new team this year. It's very different. So I love start from the bottom, build up your bulletin board material, and go into each and every one of these games hungry. You went through, Justin, just sort of based on the difficulty of each of the matches. I'm going to go ahead and look at this and say, too, I mean, not one of these teams is a team that I think that we cannot compete against. We've talked about this year. There's been very little instances or games where I feel like we've just been outclassed. There's been a couple, but not very many. And I'm looking at this list, maybe barring an LAFC or maybe even a Galaxy, each and every one of these teams, I'm confident that we can play with. We can absolutely play with, but it's about getting results. And when I mean results, I'm talking some hard wins in some unfamiliar territories. So it's possible, and that's what we're trying to explain here. It's possible. This season isn't over yet. This isn't a concession of 2024, but it's possible and attainable. I think that's what we're also saying is this team can do it with the current roster, injuries, all that considered, getting some reinforcements. Guys got to hit the ground running, and there is some runway here.
Absolutely. And I will say, yeah, I'm saying in our next 4 games, we're going to win 2 and tie 2. Say we somehow lose to Colorado. Then all we got to do is then just beat at Seattle. If you lose a point and you gain 2 back on a dub and go a net +2 there, I'll take it. So I do think that there are some ways to get around this. The reinforcements will be here. They're already on the ground in training, or at least Toyhert is right now. We'll have Hartel here get announced here in a little bit, but probably this week, honestly, why not just throw the kitchen sink at all the fans and throw through a roller coaster of everything? Ups, downs, Sam's in, Carnell's out. We're going to throw Hartel in there as well. We got guys playing together. They're on the field, but they can't play until the Kansas City game. I don't care. This is going to be an exciting end of the season. However, I think we really need to show out these next 4 games before those guys get here. We cannot be in that deep of a hole before they arrive.
No, I agree. I fully agree. I think it's possible here, Justin. And before we close it, I want to say thank you to everyone who has joined this live stream. This is by far and away the biggest stream we have ever done. And thank you all for being a part of it. And if you like what you're hearing, or you like how it's delivered, or you liked our Six Flags reference earlier in the show, whatever that reason is, shoot us a like on the video or shoot us a subscribe. Make sure you tune back in because we do this for every single game, both preview and full recap. So we're doing the dirty work, team out there. We are, we're 40 plus episodes into it. So for any new faces that are just now catching us, hi, I'm Jake, and this is Justin, and we are ball watching. I cannot believe the announcements that happened today, but we're on the other end of kind of breaking this thing down, and I'm sure we'll learn some more details here at 1 p.m. in the press conference that Lutz brings to us. I'm excited to hear what they have to say about this. I think it's going to get a little juicy.
Dude, what if I would not be surprised if they're like, no, they wouldn't do that to Carnell. They're going to talk about Carnell, give him the right passage out. I think they'll drop the Hartel news tomorrow, probably. To be respectful to Carnell, I would not expect them to drop that news. However, the dude's coming. We're going to have Hartel, Toyhert, Gerwood Reich as a center back position, which we thought when we originally heard about this, it was more forward looking. Now it's almost like an immediate looking thing with the way that our center backs are falling apart. So I'm excited for this team, dude. It is going to be an exciting couple of weeks, and stay with us. Also, please, shoot us a DM if you guys have any questions, thoughts, comments. We had a ton on Instagram. I think we were able to build them in throughout everything we talked about. If we did not get to yours, please shoot us another one, and we will definitely get you a response back. Go to souljuice.com. Use code BALLWATCHING for 20% off. Go to the pitch. Go to Series 6. Call Hoffman Brothers. It's a beautiful time of weather right now. Hit all the sponsors real quick, but God, I'm excited.
I am too. And the future begins on Wednesday as we welcome in the worst team in the MLS to City Park to maybe get a win for this one. A little what, fourth win of the season, and Hackworth's first for St. Louis City as the first team. What a joy it would be. And I think it's well within the realm of possibility. But you'll learn more about that in our full preview that we already recorded. So make sure you go check that out as we prep for San Jose. And we will be on the back of that on July 4th for a little recap and preview looking ahead to the weekend. So you got a lot more ball watching coming up this week for anyone tuning in right now. But thank you all for listening. It has been a hell of a show and a hell of a day so far. And cheers to many more days and hopefully more happiness and success for this team as we get into the rest of 2024. But thank you all for tuning in today. Ball watching signing off. We'll catch up with you all later this week.
All for City.